very warm welcome to TTK Life Strategies. My name is John and I will be your host. The topic for tonight's discussion is the magic of acceptance. And the word acceptance is one of those words that seems to have a bit of a negative effect on people. If somebody goes through a hard time and you say to them, just accept, I think the reaction is far more negative than positive. And somehow we've given this word acceptance a meaning of rolling over and playing dead or going into denial or just putting up with things. And it is so not what the word acceptance means. For one thing, the acceptance is a sure antidote for stress and for anxiety. So we're going to look at the whole process that very often we have to go through to get to that level of acceptance, and then what the benefits are of getting to that place of acceptance, what the magic is. Acceptance creates the most amazing sense of serenity, the most amazing sense of peace, and it also puts me into a position where I can really address whatever the situation is that I may be facing. So let's get started. There's a saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And again, one of the sayings that irritates some people. I remember the first time I heard it, I thought it just doesn't make sense. I don't see the logic in the statement. But what it means is that while we are on this earth, while we are alive, we will go through situations and circumstances and events that will cause us to experience emotional pain or frustration. It's just something that we have to get our heads around. Is going to be that way. Suffering, however, is not inevitable. Suffering, and by suffering we mean the ongoing, lingering pain. Suffering is the result of the meaning that we give the situation and the emotions that result from that meaning. Suffering results from three main principles I've learned in my life. First of all, attachment. When we hold on to things that no longer serve us, that are no longer good for us, it may be relationship, we realize that the situation is causing more pain and more stress, but for some reason we are unable to let go, and that attachment and that holding on causes suffering, and we will explore what happens in this whole process that actually causes the suffering. Suffering is also the result of resistance, fighting against, pushing against something I don't want, something I don't like. And it's a natural reaction. I think most of us, if not all of us, somewhere along the line have been conditioned to resist what we don't like, to complain about it, to fight, to push against it. And all that happens is that creates more and more suffering or more and more stress. The third thing that causes suffering is blame. When I project blame onto people's situations. Now, by no means do I minimize the fact that things sometimes do happen, things we may not be responsible for. People may say and do things that can cause pain or suffering. However, as long as I blame, as long as I resist, as long as I hold on to, what am I doing? I'm focusing on this particular situation that is causing me pain, that is causing me suffering. And the more I focus onto this situation, or this person, or this event, or this circumstance, through natural laws, I create and experience more of that. So we're going to look what we can do instead of holding on to, instead of pushing against, instead of projecting blame, what we can do when we face painful or negative situations, and how we can change our experience. Suffering is also the result of judging and labeling. And of course that goes with attachment and with resistance and with blaming. When we label something as bad, when we label something as unacceptable, when we label something as unfair, when we judge something as something we don't want, something we hate, something we despise, and it's very natural to do that. But remember, we're looking at factors that cause or increase more suffering, more stress. And the meaning we give a situation, and I often refer to this in my talks and workshops, the meaning I give a situation is ultimately what causes me to experience the situation. And whatever I judge or label as negative or bad or painful, that will be how I will experience that. Anything that I resist or push against because it is bad, I don't want it. Anything that I hold on to that I may view as precious or needed in my life, anything that I blame or anybody that I blame continues to create more of my painful and stressful experience. The suffering that results have a mental, emotional, and physical impact, and that is a very important principle to understand. Doctors tell us that the number one contributing factor to physical health, to mental health issues or challenges is the S word, stress. What is stress? Stress is the experience that we have of situations as a result of the meaning that we give to those situations and as a result of the emotions that follow the meaning we give to the situations. It's unresolved emotions, it's resistance, it's attachment, it's blaming. All that causes stress. And stress affects the brain processes, our cognitive ability. It affects our emotions with regards to causing anger and sadness and fear and anxiety and depression. And over a period of time, it can also cause physical illness. And all of that is essentially because our negative thinking, our focusing on the situations that we interpret as negative, that cause us negative feelings and emotions and experiences, ultimately affect the biochemical balance within our brains and our bodies. And once the biochemical balances are affected, it affects the electromagnetic processes in the body and the brain. And that in turn affects how the brain and the body functions. And that in turn can cause physical and mental and emotional disturbances or illness, all because of resisting, holding on to, or blaming that creates negative emotions and negative feelings. I'm going to make a statement that affects a lot of people in quite interesting ways. Some people get angry, some people get frustrated, some people fall into victim mode, and the saying is that everything is perfect as it is. Now, I want you to take a couple of seconds and just consider some what you may be inclined to label as unacceptable or negative situations in your life that you are experiencing currently. And listen to me saying that everything is perfect as it is. And what causes people to react negatively to the statement is the meaning that we are inclined to give to the word perfect. Purely from a semantics point of view, the word perfect doesn't necessarily imply good. It implies the culmination of a process or an outcomes or a result. Everything in my life, every situation, every circumstance, every experience that I've had is an effect or a result or an outcomes that was caused by something. Something took place that caused the particular result. Somebody spoke to me very unkindly and very disrespectfully. That was the cause. I then experienced negative emotions, for example, sadness or maybe anger. That's the effect. And we are then inclined to blame the person for what they said. It is because of you that I feel sad or I feel angry. Well, that is not how it works. The cause is not the actual situation. The cause is the meaning-making process that takes place within my mind, my thinking, the way that I describe the situation to myself, my narrative, the story in my head, the meaning I give the situation that causes the emotions, that causes me to feel the way that I do as a result of the situation or the effect. So by no means do we completely eliminate the impact that somebody or an external situation can have, but that only plays around about 10% of a role. The other 90% of the cause is what happens inside of me in response to the situation that creates the effect. Now, the saying, everything is perfect as it is, implies that what is right now cannot be any different. Why? Because it is the outcomes or the result or an effect of a cause, and it cannot be any better than it is. Why? Because it is the effect, the result, or the outcome of a cause. So if I'm not happy with the effect, if I'm not happy with the result, if I'm not happy with the outcomes, and I resist, or I hold on to, or I blame, what am I doing? I'm creating more and more negative causes that will create more and more negative effects. So when I start to realize it is not the external factor that is the main cause, but it is my mentality, my consciousness, my mental processes, and my nervous system's biochemical response that creates the effect, it really puts me into a position where I can look at whatever it is I'm experiencing, and I can look for ways and means to change the meaning. And as a result, create new causes that will create new effects. The best remedy for suffering or stress is acceptance. What is acceptance? And as I intimated in the beginning, acceptance does not mean that I roll over and play dead. It doesn't mean I go into denial and pretend everything's okay. It doesn't mean I suck it up. Acceptance simply means having an attitude towards the situation of it is perfect as it is because it is the outcomes, it is the result, it is the effect of one or two situations that caused whatever it is I'm experiencing now. It is what it is. I've tried everything to change it. I've tried everything to feel better and nothing is working. So I'm going to give this situation permission to be what it is. And while we go through this, by the way, I want you to think of any particular negative situation that you may be experiencing right now and apply these principles and just see what happens for you. So I give the situation permission to be. I don't have to be happy about it. I don't even have to like it. I just come to the place, to the point, it is what it is. I'm going to give it permission to be, and I will then do what I need to do to create a better outcomes or a better effect.
Acceptance is a very active process. There's nothing passive about it. It's not passive resignation, but it's an active recognition that things are actually the way they are. Sometimes they're not the way we want them to be. So acceptance doesn't mean that we can't work to change the world or to change circumstances of one kind or another, but it means that unless we accept things as they are, we will try to force things to be as they are not, and that can create an enormous amount of difficulty. If we recognize the actuality of things, then we have the potential to apply wisdom in that situation to actually shift our own relationship to what is occurring in ways that might be profoundly healing and transformative. But without acceptance of one's situation, then it's very difficult to know where to stand. And without knowing where to stand, it's very difficult to take the first step. But what we find working with chronic pain patients is that before you can actually work with pain and suffering, you need to actually put out the welcome mat for it and accept it as it is, because whatever has been done medically that could be done has been done, and you're still living with a certain degree of pain. What our people with chronic pain who come to our clinic experience is that there's a lot of different ways to actually work with pain, but the first step is to actually put out the welcome mat for it, which is very hard to do when you're suffering, but it's actually a gateway into freedom from suffering. So that's one of the most powerful ways in which acceptance can be brought to bear on healing and transforming one's life, and is a very, very powerful factor and is a very, very powerful attitude in the cultivation of mindfulness.
We're going to look at the whole process that we may have to go through to get from the place of resistance to the place of acceptance. But I just want to make the statement, the situation that we may be experiencing that may be unacceptable or causing suffering and pain, first of all, it shows us what it is that we do not want. And at the same time, we also have an opportunity to figure out what it is that we would like to experience instead. And we can then move towards the alternative experience that we want. So we're going to look at a process or steps or phases that we may need to work through to get to that place to ultimately create more of what it is that we really, really want.